So in honor of Women's History Month, I'm sharing 3 books by women about women, and they all celebrate the strength, the resilience, and just groundbreaking achievements of all these historical heroines. So the first book I'm going to share with you is an Ariel Lauren book, and it's entitled The Frozen River. Now, in this one, you're going to step back into the 1700s. It's set in an early American town where there is a man accused of R-ing someone. Now, this man turns up dead, and it plunges the entire community into chaos. Now, here's a fun fact. This book is inspired by the true diaries of a midwife. Her name is Martha. This is set in a town in Maine. And when we meet her, we really discover just how much of a fierce and determined woman she is. She's also a woman of integrity. She has an impeccable record. And then she's thrown in the heart of this whole scandal. Now, she has seen lots of things throughout her time. And her taking a stand on this controversial case was very, very profound. There's lots of suspense and emotional intensity as well. I want you to just expect a book that is a real page turner. I think this one was an absolute winner. You get the courtroom drama, you get the historical detail, but also the personal courage of our main character, Martha. It's like Martha's journey is just one of defiance in a way. Again, we're going back to the 1700s. So just seeing her being this very determined woman, it makes for a really compelling read. So if you're looking for, true historical fiction with lots of heart, I think this one is definitely for you. The second book I'd like to share with you is Becoming Madam Secretary by Stephanie Dray. Now, this one has, again, another determined woman at the center, because determined women are the centerfold of all the books I'm sharing with you today. Now, this woman shattered every glass ceiling that was in her way. But the thing she's most known for is that she was the first woman to serve in the US cabinet. Now, this is historical fiction. So this is a fictional biography of this woman. But like most of the material in the book about her life is true, but the areas where you don't have that clarity, that's where fiction comes in. I also interviewed this author on the pod, so you can get more insight into this. But let me tell you about Frances. Now, Frances, this is set in the early 1900s. So book 1 was 1700s, now we're in the 1900s. This is set in New York City, and we meet this woman who, by the way, has a master's degree, which is wild for the early 1900s. She's studying childhood malnutrition as a part of her master's thesis. And, she's discovering a lot of things, and she becomes very passionate about not just children's rights, but also workers' rights as well, because she's discovering multiple layers of things as she's doing her studies. Now, she takes a job with, I guess, what would be our Consumer Protections Bureau for back in the day. And while in this job, she actually meets who will become the future president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now, it's interesting when these two meet, just because their political ideals are just kind of like opposite. So of course, there is some respect, but they're clashing with, their ideas of the way they think things should be. Now, anyway, her personal life, she falls in love with this economist, which is also very important because, marrying a man who also is an expert in his field, handling a woman at that time who's also an expert in her field, who is very educated and just very passionate about her work. It was a very interesting match. However, her husband, unfortunately, is living with depression, and he has some manic episodes along the way. That is enough in terms of personal life that I'm going to give you, because I really don't want to spoil it. But essentially, we see her, right, postmasters, working at the Consumer Protections Board for that time, and then her moving up through the ranks to become the Secretary of Labor. So that was very, very interesting. Also, her role is part of the reason why we have Social Security today in America, because she helped to push through the Social Security Act of 1935. So that is a very important part in history. But what I love most about this book is that it didn't just focus on her professional rise. We also see her struggles as a person. So we see her personal side as well. We see what her marriage was like, trying to care for her husband and be there for him. also like wanting to be a mom and just, navigating all of those things. So essentially, we get both the personal and the professional triumphs, but also challenges of this woman. I think this is required reading, honestly, just for anyone who is inspired by women who have reshaped history against all odds. The last book I'm going to share with you, my third book, is Finding Margaret Fuller. Now, Finding Margaret Fuller is by Alison Pataki. I also have an interview for this one on the podcast as well. Now, in case you're not familiar, Margaret Fuller is a 19th century woman. She's a feminist, trailblazer, and she actually inspired, mentored, or was probably the muse for some of our favorite writers in classic literature and so on. Now, anyway, this one is taking us back to Concord, Massachusetts. This is around 1830 something, 1840 something, and we meet Margaret when she's a young 20 something. She is very well educated for a woman of that time, and we see her really define social norms by connecting with all these big literary giants. So when I said she probably had a hand or a touch or something to do with literary giants that we know, for example, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and just lots of these influential figures. I mean, there's even something with the Alcotts in there, all right? So anyway, she is admired by these people, but also she's struggling with her own challenges, right? She has loneliness. She also has some financial hardships. But even though she's working at this magazine, with all these literary peoples, she also became the first female foreign correspondent for the New York Tribune, right? So we see her journey. She traveled through New England, but then she ended up in Italy. And we see her even covering like their fight for independence over there during that time and just kind of wanting to get away from their existing regime. We also see her getting involved with someone over there and all kinds of things. Now, we see a woman essentially who is ahead of her time, a tad bit earnest sometimes, if I'm going to be honest. However, she's very, very resilient. We see what happens to her in the end. I don't want to spoil that for you. But essentially, it was very refreshing to just see a woman who had a voice at the time when obviously society was dominated by men. So yes, those are my books. Again, I just think there's so many wonderful books out there about women in history. So if you are interested in bravery and the resilience and the power and just all the things women did to change the world, I think these 3 books are for you. So from a midwife to someone who became the first female cabinet member, to also someone who influenced a lot of our literary faves. It's just really interesting to kind of see women at the forefront.